businessman left speechless after seeing vendor who looks identical to his ex-wife. Richard Thompson was walking hurriedly through the alleys of the Maxwell Street Market in Chicago when his steps gradually slowed until he came to a complete stop. There was something about the young woman selling handmade sweets that left him frozen, as if time had rewound 30 years into the past. The girl smiled as she arranged the colorful jars filled with homemade candies and chocolates, and that smile was exactly like Jennifer's when they first met in college. The same deep brown eyes, the same way of tilting her head when concentrating, even the delicate movement of her hands as she worked. "Are you all right, sir?" asked the young woman, noticing he had been standing there watching her stall for several minutes. Richard blinked several times, trying to snap back to reality. His voice was hoarse when he answered, Yes, I wanted to buy some sweets." "Of course. These are Belgian chocolate, these are toasted coconut, and here we have the famous honey and propolis candies from Grandma Grace," she explained enthusiastically, pointing to the different jars. Her voice was similar too, sweet and melodic. Richard felt his hands tremble slightly. "I'll take all of them," he said without even asking the price. "All of them, sir?" she asked, surprised. "Yes, all the jars." "How much is it?" The young woman quickly calculated, clearly nervous about such a large and unexpected sale. "That'll be $250, sir, but are you sure? It's a lot." Richard took $300 from his wallet and handed it to her. "Keep the change. What's your name?" "Emily, sir, Emily Wilson. Thank you so much. This sale will really help. Grandma needs medicine and—" "Emily," he repeated, as if testing the name on his lips. It was the name Jennifer had always said she would give a daughter if they ever had one. Richard felt a tightness in his chest. "Do you come here often?" Emily asked as she carefully packed the sweets. "No, it's my first time, but maybe I'll come back tomorrow." "Oh, I won't be here tomorrow, sir. I only come when I need to sell to help with Grandma's expenses. She's sick and—" "When will you be back then?" "Next week, maybe. It depends on how she's doing." Richard took a business card from his pocket and handed it to her. "If you need anything, call me." Emily looked at the card in surprise. Richard Thompson, Chief Executive Officer, Thompson Construction and Associates. "You're a businessman?" "I am. And you, do you study?" "I finished high school last year. I wanted to go to culinary school, but I can't leave Grandma alone right now." Richard nodded, still studying every detail of her face. The resemblance was unsettling. "Well, I should go, but call me if you need anything, all right?" "Yes, Mr. Richard. Thank you so much." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. Richard returned to the office completely shaken. He couldn't focus on any meetings for the rest of the day. His secretary, Mrs. Barbara, who had worked with him for 15 years, noticed his agitation. "Mr. Richard, is something wrong? You seem very off today." "Barbara, do you remember Jennifer, my ex-wife?" "Of course I remember. How long has it been since you separated?" 20-something years. 28 years, he answered precisely. "Do you think it's possible for someone to look exactly like another person without being related?" Barbara looked at him with concern. "Sir, what happened?" Richard told her about the encounter at the market, leaving out only the depth of his unease. Could she be related to Jennifer? A niece, cousin? Jennifer was an only child, and her parents, they passed away years ago. Then it must just be a coincidence. The world is full of strange things. But Richard couldn't accept it was just a coincidence. That night, in his empty penthouse in the Gold Coast neighborhood, he opened a closet he hadn't touched in years and pulled out a dusty shoebox. Inside were the only photos he'd kept of Jennifer. Under the lamplight, he mentally compared Emily's face to the photos. It was unsettling. It wasn't just a resemblance. It was as if Jennifer had returned at 18. Over the next few days, Richard couldn't get the young woman out of his head. He passed by the Maxwell Street Market every day, but the sweets stand remained empty. He spoke with other vendors and learned the girl appeared irregularly whenever her grandmother needed money for medicine. On Thursday, his phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Hello?" Mr. Richard, it's Emily from the market. You said to call if I needed... Emily? Yes, of course. What is it? It's just... Grandma's condition got worse. She needs a very expensive medicine, and I was wondering if you might want to order more sweets. I can make a large batch for you. Richard felt his heart race. Here was the opportunity he'd been waiting for. Of course. Actually, my company is organizing an event. We need sweets for about 200 guests. Could you manage that? 200? She stammered. I think so. That would be a lot of money for us. Great. How about we talk in person? Can I stop by this afternoon? You'd come to my house, but it's very simple here. No problem. Just give me the address. Emily lived in a small house in the Bridgeport neighborhood, a modest but respectable area in Chicago's North Side. Richard arrived at 3 in the afternoon, driving his Cadillac discreetly. He didn't want to intimidate. The house was indeed simple. 2 rooms in front and a small backyard where Emily had improvised a kitchen to make the sweets. She greeted him a little shyly, wearing a light blue blouse and jeans. Come in, Mr. Richard. Grandma is sleeping. She takes strong pain medication. Richard entered and immediately noticed the photos on the living room shelf. There were several of Emily at different ages, but what caught his attention was an old photo of a young woman who could be no one else but Jennifer. Who is this girl? He asked, trying to sound casual. Oh, that's my mother. She left when I was little. Left? She had health problems. When I was 3, she left me with Grandma and went away. Grandma says she didn't want me to see her suffering. Richard felt the world spin. Jennifer had left in 2004, exactly when Emily would have been 3. What was her name? Jennifer Wilson. Why do you ask? Richard had to steady himself against the wall. It was her. It was really her. I knew someone by that name a long time ago, he lied. What a coincidence. Grandma, Emily called when she heard noise from the bedroom. Grandma woke up. I'll check on her. Richard was left alone in the living room for a few minutes, studying more photos. In one of them, Jennifer appeared pregnant. He picked up the photo with trembling hands and turned it over to see if there was a date. Jennifer, 7 months 2002 was written on the back. 2002. They had separated at the end of 2001 after a terrible fight where he'd said he never wanted children, that a child would interfere with his plans to build a business empire. Mr. Richard? Emily's voice startled him. Are you okay? He quickly put the photo back. Yes. How is your grandmother? Better. She'd like to meet you if you don't mind. Richard was introduced to Mrs. Grace, a woman in her 70s with sharp eyes despite her frail appearance. Nice to meet you, Mrs. Grace. The pleasure is mine, young man. Em told me you want to order a lot of sweets. That's right. For a company event. Mrs. Grace studied him for a few seconds with a strange look, as if trying to remember something. You don't look like a stranger. Have we met before? Richard felt a chill. I don't think so, ma'am. Must be my imagination. Getting old, you know. They discussed the details of the order. Though Richard had made up an event just to have an excuse to keep seeing Emily, he agreed to return the next day to sample some flavors. Leaving the house, Richard drove aimlessly through the streets of Chicago, trying to process what he'd discovered. Jennifer had hidden the pregnancy from him. His daughter, because he was now certain Emily was his daughter, had grown up without a father in modest conditions caring for a sick grandmother. And him? He'd spent 20 years building a $1 million company, living alone in a luxurious penthouse, never knowing he had a child in the world. His phone rang. It was Mrs. Barbara. Mr. Richard, where are you? You missed the meeting with the investors. Barbara, cancel all my appointments tomorrow. But sir, cancel everything. It's important. That night, Richard didn't sleep a wink. He stood on the penthouse balcony, staring at the city lights, wondering how Jennifer had managed to hide a pregnancy from him. He remembered the last months of their marriage, the constant fights, him working late every day, weekends entirely devoted to business. Jennifer had complained he'd changed, that he wasn't the romantic man she'd met in college anymore. And she was right. Richard had become obsessed with success, cold and calculating. In their final fight, when she suggested trying for a child to save the marriage, he exploded, saying he'd never have kids, that children were obstacles for ambitious people. 2 weeks later, Jennifer had filed for divorce and left. He thought she was being dramatic, that she'd come back. He never saw her again. Now he understood why she hadn't told him about the pregnancy. He'd made it very clear he didn't want children. The next day, Richard returned to Emily's house with his heart in his throat. She had prepared a table with various sweets for him to try. "Try this one," she said, offering a chocolate bonbon. "It's Grandma's recipe, but I tweaked it a little." Richard took a bite and was surprised. It was delicious. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" "From Grandma, but I also love watching cooking shows and experimenting. I dream of having a restaurant someday." "Why not go to culinary school?" Emily's smile faded slightly. "I can't leave Grandma alone, and we don't have money for private school. I tried to get into a public one, but I didn't make it." "You could try again. Maybe when Grandma gets better." Mrs. Grace appeared in the living room, walking slowly with a cane. "Young man, can I talk to you for a minute? Alone?" Emily looked surprised. "Grandma, what is it?" "Just a quick chat. Go start lunch. I'll be right there." Richard followed the older woman to the backyard. She sat on a plastic chair in the shade of a tree and motioned for him to sit too. "I know who you are," she said bluntly. Richard's blood ran cold. "What do you mean, ma'am?" "Jennifer showed me your photos when she told me she was pregnant. I never forget a face. Mrs. Grace. She made me promise I'd never tell Em who her father was. Said you'd made it very clear you didn't want kids." Richard lowered his head, weighed down by guilt. "It's true. I said that. But you changed your mind, didn't you? Otherwise, you wouldn't be here." I didn't even know she was pregnant. Jennifer never told me." Mrs. Grace sighed. "She was afraid. Said you only cared about work, that you'd be furious." "And she was right," Richard admitted. "Back then, I was a different person. All I cared about was money and success." "And now?" Richard looked out the kitchen window, where Emily was humming while cooking. "Now I see I wasted 20 years of the most important part of my life. Em is a special girl. She gave up her own dreams to take care of me. Never complained, never gave me any trouble. I can see that. But I won't live forever, young man. And when I'm gone, she'll be all alone in this world." Richard felt his eyes well up. "What do you want me to do?" "First, tell me something. Do you really want to get to know your daughter? Or are you just here out of curiosity?" "I want to know her," he said firmly. "I want to make up for all those lost years." "Then do it right. Em has suffered enough in life. Don't show up here if you're just going to leave later." "I'm not leaving." Mrs. Grace studied him for a few seconds. "All right, but I don't think you should tell her the truth right away. Let her get used to you first." "I agree. And one more thing, don't try to buy her affection with money. Em has her pride." Richard nodded, understanding the woman's wisdom. Over the next few weeks, Richard came up with all sorts of excuses to visit Emily. He claimed he needed sweets for other events, that he wanted to learn recipes to give as gifts to clients, that he was interested in investing in the handmade sweets business. Emily was excited about the prospect of having an investor partner and started making plans to expand the business. On weekends, Richard would show up to help with the candy making, something he never imagined he'd do in his life. "You're not what I thought business people were like," Emily said one Saturday as they melted chocolate. "How so?" "I don't know. I figured they'd be more snobbish, full of themselves. But you're down to earth, easy to talk to, don't mind getting your hands dirty." Richard smiled sadly. If only she knew how he used to be. "People change, Emily. Life teaches you a lot." "That's true. Grandma always says we only grow when we face hardships. Your grandmother is a wise woman." "She is. She raised my mum alone after my grandpa passed, and she raised me alone after my mum passed. She's the strongest person I know." "And you take after her." "What do you mean?" "You're strong too, taking care of your grandmother, working to support the household, giving up college. Not everyone would do that." Emily smiled, blushing a little. Oh, anyone would do that for family. No, Emily, not everyone would. You're special. Her eyes shone at his words, and Richard felt a pang in his chest. How had he wasted so much time? Why wasn't he there to watch this wonderful girl grow up? Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us just starting out. Now, continuing. A month after their first meeting, Mrs. Grace had a respiratory emergency in the middle of the night. Emily called Richard in a panic, and he arrived in 15 minutes, taking them to the private hospital where he had insurance. Mr. Richard, I can't afford a private hospital, Emily said, distraught. Don't worry about that now. Let's focus on your grandmother first. At the hospital, while Mrs. Grace underwent tests, Richard and Emily waited in the lobby. She was visibly shaken. What if she doesn't get better? She asked, tears filling her eyes. Richard wanted to hug her, to comfort her like a father would, but he still didn't know how to act. Your grandmother is strong. She'll be fine. It's just, I don't know what I'd do without her. She's all I have in this world. The words hit Richard like a knife. His daughter felt completely alone in the world, and there he was, right beside her, unable to tell her who he really was. You're not alone, he said softly. What do you mean? You have friends, you have people who care about you. People. Emily looked at him in surprise. You care about me? Of course I do, very much. She smiled for the first time since they'd arrived at the hospital. Thank you, Mr. Richard. You've been so kind to us. An older nurse approached them. Are you Mrs. Grace Wilson's family? I'm her granddaughter, Emily replied. And you? Richard hesitated. I'm a family friend. The nurse studied him more closely. Sorry, but you look familiar. Have you worked here before? No. That's odd. I'm sure I've seen you somewhere. She paused, thoughtful. Wait a minute. Aren't you that businessman who used to come here about 20 years ago? Had a wife who was hospitalized for pregnancy complications? Richard felt the world collapse beneath him. Emily looked at him confused. Pregnancy? She murmured. The nurse continued. Yes, I remember. Jennifer, right? Such a sad story. She lost the baby. And then her husband left her. Lost the baby? Richard interrupted, bewildered. Yeah, poor thing. It was a very complicated situation. She had complications during delivery. The baby was born, but the nurse stopped abruptly, realizing she might have said too much. Sorry, I think I got it wrong. But the damage was done. Emily was pale. Mr. Richard, did you know my mother? The nurse quickly walked away, sensing the misunderstanding she'd caused. Richard looked at Emily, seeing the mix of confusion and suspicion in her eyes. The moment of truth had come sooner than he'd expected. Emily, I can explain. Then explain, she said, her voice trembling. Richard took a deep breath. Let's sit down. It's a long story. They settled in a quieter corner of the waiting room. Richard began to tell everything. His marriage to Jennifer, their fights, his obsession with work, the separation. He only left out the fact that he suspected he might be Emily's father. So you were married to my mother? She asked, disbelieving. I was for 3 years. And why did she never tell me? Because our separation was too painful. I said terrible things to her. I was cruel. Emily fell silent for a few minutes, processing the information. That's why you seemed familiar from the first day. You looked so much like her when she was young. And that's why you started coming to our house, helping us because of my mother. Richard chose his words carefully. At first, yes. I was shocked by the resemblance. But later I grew to care about you. Truly. But the nurse said my mother lost a baby. I didn't know about that pregnancy, Emily. Your mother never told me. So I'm not... I mean, if she lost the baby... Emily was confused, trying to piece together the timeline. Richard realized she was assuming he wasn't her father. Emily, I think the nurse was mistaken. Or maybe your mother had more than one pregnancy. Just then, a doctor approached them. Family of Mrs. Grace Wilson? That's us, Emily said, standing quickly. She's stable. It was an anxiety attack that affected her breathing. We'll keep her under observation tonight, but it's nothing serious. Emily sighed in relief. Can I see her? Of course. She's awake and asking for you. Richard stayed in the waiting room while Emily went to see her grandmother. He was troubled by what the nurse had said. Jennifer had lost a baby. But when? And if Emily wasn't his daughter? Half an hour later, Emily returned. How is she? Better, but she wants to talk to you. Richard followed Emily to the room. Mrs. Grace was lying down, connected to monitors, but she was conscious and lucid. Richard, she said weakly, come closer. He approached the bed. Em told me you talked about Jennifer. We did. So you told her you were married to her? I did. And about Em's paternity? Richard looked at Emily, who was confused. No, I thought it was better not to. What paternity? Emily interrupted. What are you talking about? Mrs. Grace sighed. Sweetheart, come sit by Grandma. Emily sat in the chair next to the bed. Em, my dear, I'm going to tell you something I promised your mother I'd take to the grave, but I think the time has come. Grandma, what is it? Richard is your father. The silence that followed was deafening. Emily looked at Richard, then at her grandmother, then back at Richard. Father? What do you mean, father? Your biological father, Mrs. Grace explained. Jennifer was pregnant when she left him. She didn't tell him because he'd said he didn't want children. Emily stood up abruptly. This can't be true. It is true, Richard said, his voice choked. I only found out when I saw you at the market. The resemblance to your mother I started to suspect. But the nurse said my mother lost a baby. Jennifer was pregnant twice, Mrs. Grace explained. The first time was when she was still married to Richard. She lost that baby in the 5th month. It was very traumatic. A few months later, they separated. Richard vaguely remembered. Jennifer had been sick for a few weeks, but he was so wrapped up in work, he didn't pay much attention. She said it was a women's issue, and he didn't question it. And the second pregnancy? Emily asked. It was a few months after the separation. She found out she was pregnant with you, but didn't have the courage to tell him. She moved here with me, and you were born here. Emily was pale, in shock. So I have a father. All this time I had a father and didn't know. She looked at Richard with a mix of emotions, confusion, anger, sadness. Why didn't you tell me when you found out? Because I wanted you to know me first, to not be afraid of me. Afraid? Why would I be afraid? Because I was a terrible husband to your mother. I was selfish, cold, obsessed with work. She was right not to tell me about you. Emily began to cry. I always wanted to know who my father was. I always imagined what he'd be like if he'd care about me. I do care, Richard said, stepping closer. I care so much. These last months getting to know you have been the best of my life. But you lied to me. You pretended to just be a client. I was scared. Scared you'd reject me if you knew the truth. Mrs. Grace reached out to Emily. Sweetheart, come here. Sit down. Emily sat again, still crying. Your mother did what she thought was best at the time, and Richard is doing what he thinks is best now. But why didn't anyone ask what I wanted? Emily said between sobs. I had the right to know who my father was. You're right, Richard admitted. You had that right, and I'm sorry it took me so long to come into your life. You didn't even know I existed. But I should have. If I'd been a better husband, your mother would have told me about the pregnancy. Emily was silent for a few minutes, wiping her tears. I need time to process all this. Of course, Richard said. I understand. Do you really want to be my father? Or are you just here out of guilt? The question hit Richard like a punch. I want to be your father. I want to make up for all those lost years. I want to be in your life if you'll let me. Emily looked into his eyes, searching for sincerity. What if I'm a disappointment? What if I'm not the daughter you expected? Emily, said Richard, kneeling beside her chair, you're exactly the daughter I always dreamed of having. I just didn't know it before. You're smart, brave, generous, hardworking. I'm the one who's afraid I won't be the father you deserve. For a few seconds, father and daughter looked into each other's eyes for the first time. knowing who they were to one another. Can I give you a hug?" Richard asked hesitantly. Emily nodded, and they embraced for the first time. Richard felt tears streaming down his face as he held his daughter in his arms. "I'm so sorry I wasn't here before," he whispered. "You're here now," she replied. "That's what matters." Mrs. Grace watched the scene with emotion. "Now my family is truly complete," she said softly. "Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. The following days were a period of adjustment for everyone. Emily needed time to process the new reality, and Richard respected that space. They talked often, first over the phone, then in person. Richard shared about his life, how he had become financially successful but emotionally empty. Emily spoke about her childhood, how she had always wondered about her father, and the dreams she had for the future. "I always imagined my father was a bad man who abandoned my mother," Emily confessed in one of their conversations. "Grandma never spoke ill of you, but I assumed I was a bad man back then," Richard admitted. "Not physically, but emotionally. I hurt people with my coldness." "And what changed?" "Seeing you changed everything, seeing the kind of person you became, even without a father present. It made me realize what truly matters in life." Richard also began visiting their home more regularly, helping with Mrs. Grace's medical expenses and the ingredients for the sweets. He made sure not to flaunt his wealth, respecting the family's pride. "Dad," Emily said one day, testing the word for the first time, "can I ask you something?" Richard's heart warmed at the word, Dad. "Of course, sweetheart." "Do you regret not having children before, with my mom or with anyone else?" "I regret being so blind, but I don't regret you being my only child. You're perfect." "I'm not perfect." "To me, you are." A month after the revelation, Mrs. Grace was discharged from the hospital and returned home. She was frailer but stable. Richard suggested they move to a larger, more comfortable house, but Emily refused. "This house holds our story," she said. "It's where I grew up, where my mother lived. I don't want to leave the memories behind." Richard understood and respected her decision. Instead, he offered to renovate the house, making it more accessible for Mrs. Grace and expanding the kitchen where Emily made the sweets. "But I don't want you spending too much money on us," Emily said. "Why not?" "Because I don't want people saying that now that I've found out I have a rich father, I'm taking advantage." Richard realized her concern was valid. He himself had grown up hearing stories of people who appeared in wealthy families' lives only for the money. "Then let's make a deal," he proposed. "I'll help with what's necessary for your grandmother's health and to improve the sweets business. But you keep working, stay independent. What about college?" "College? You're not going to insist I go to college." "Do you want to go to college?" "I do, I always have, but not now. Right now, I want to take care of Grandma and grow the sweets business. So here's what we'll do. When you feel ready for college, I'll help. But on your time, your way." Emily smiled. "Thank you, Dad." The house renovation took 2 months. Richard made sure to personally oversee every detail, not trusting just the construction workers. He wanted everything to be perfect for his family. During that time, they settled into a routine. Richard would stop by the house every morning before heading to the office, have coffee with them and talk about their plans for the day. He'd return in the late afternoon to help Emily with her candy production. "Dad, can I tell you something?" Emily said one day as they were tempering chocolate. "Of course." "I was afraid of getting used to having a dad and then you disappearing." "Why would you think that?" "Because it's too good to be true. I've never had anything really good in my life. I've always been scared that good things are temporary." Richard stopped what he was doing and looked at her. "Emily, I'm not going anywhere. Even if you get mad at me, even if we fight, even if I make mistakes, and I'll make plenty because I'm learning to be a dad at 50, I won't disappear from your life." "Promise?" "I promise." Their relationship deepened gradually. Richard learned that Emily loved old movies, so they started having movie nights at home on weekends. He discovered she adored stories about places she'd never visited, so he began bringing her travel books. Emily, in turn, helped Richard rediscover simple pleasures he'd forgotten. He started cooking again, something he hadn't done in decades, He began paying attention to sunsets, listening to music, laughing at silly things. "You know what's funny?" Richard said one Sunday as they watched a movie in the renovated living room. "What?" "I spent 30 years building a company, saving money, buying expensive things. I thought that was success. But I feel more fulfilled here, in this simple room, eating popcorn with you and your grandma, than I ever did in any business meeting." "It's because now you have family," said Mrs. Grace, who was lying on the couch with a blanket over her legs. "That's true," Richard agreed. "Family changes everything." Mrs. Grace was growing increasingly frail, but kept her good humor and sharp mind. She loved telling Richard stories about Emily's childhood, filling in the gaps of all those lost years. "When Em was 5, she shared one day, she decided she wanted to make me a birthday cake, but she was too little to use the stove by herself." "What did she do?" Richard asked. "She mixed all the ingredients in a bowl and left it out in the backyard sun, said the sun would bake the cake. She watched it all day, waiting for the cake to rise." "Did it?" Richard teased. "Of course not," Mrs. Grace laughed, "but she was so proud of her recipe that she insisted I eat it. It was this sweet, half-liquid dough, but I ate it all and told her it was delicious." "Grandma," Emily protested, embarrassed. "Why are you telling him that?" "Because your father needs to know the kind of girl you were, always trying to take care of others, always creative, always determined." Richard looked at Emily tenderly. "Some things never change," he said. "You're still like that." With the candy business growing, Richard suggested Emily hire an assistant. "I don't need to, Dad, I can handle it. But you're working 12-hour days, that's not healthy." "It's temporary, until I get better organized." "Emily, let me give you some advice I learned the hard way. Don't sacrifice your personal life for work. I did that and I lost your mother. Or I lost you. But I like working. I did too, but work without balance becomes an obsession, and obsession destroys relationships." Emily considered her father's words. "All right, but I get to choose the person." "Of course." They hired Ashley, a 22-year-old who had lost her job when a bakery closed down. Ashley was efficient and caring, and soon became almost part of the family. With more free time, Emily could focus on studying for her college entrance exams. Richard offered to pay for a prep course, but she preferred studying on her own using books and free online video lessons. "Are you sure you don't want to take a prep course?" Richard insisted. "I'm sure. I want to get in on my own merit." "But you already have merit. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. I have to prove it to myself." Richard understood. Emily had spent her whole life fighting alone. Accepting help didn't come naturally to her. 4 months after the paternity revelation, Mrs. Grace's health took a sudden turn for the worse. She was hospitalized again, this time in the ICU. Richard and Emily took turns staying with her. During moments when she was unconscious, they talked about memories, fears, and hopes. "Dad, can I ask you something difficult?" Emily said during one of those night vigils. "Of course." If she doesn't get better, will you still be in my life?" Richard was shocked by the question. "What do you mean?" "Of course I will. It's just, she's the connection between us. She kept the secrets. She brought us together. Emily, look at me." She raised her tear-reddened eyes. "You're my daughter. That has nothing to do with your grandmother. I love you because you're you, not because of the circumstances that brought us together. Even if I'm left alone in the world, you'll never be alone in the world. You have a father. You have family. Promise you won't abandon me." "I promise." "And more. I promise I'll take care of you as long as I live. Even if you get married, even if you have your own children, even if you grow old and cranky, I'll be here." Emily smiled for the first time in days. "Old and cranky? Just like your grandma," Richard teased. Mrs. Grace remained hospitalized for 2 weeks. On the last day, she had a moment of clarity and asked to speak to Richard alone. "I'll be leaving soon," she said weakly. "Don't say that, Mrs. Grace. No use pretending. I know when it's time, but I need to ask you something. Anything. Take care of my girl. She'll pretend she's strong, but inside, she's fragile. She lost her mother so young, and now she's losing her grandma." I'll take care of her, I promise. And don't let her give up on her dreams. She always wanted to study, see places, have a family. Help her achieve those things. I will. One last thing. When I'm gone, the two of you will miss me terribly. But don't let sadness ruin the happiness of having found each other. You deserve each other. Mrs. Grace, thank you for taking care of my granddaughter. Thank you for becoming the man she deserved as a father. Mrs. Grace passed away in the early hours of the next morning, peacefully in her sleep. Emily was by her side, holding her hand. Richard arrived minutes after she closed her eyes forever. Emily cried like he had never seen her cry before, a deep, visceral pain, the kind that comes from losing the only family she had ever known. She's gone, Dad, she sobbed in his arms. Now I'm truly alone. You're not alone, Richard said, holding her tightly. You have a father. You have family. It's not the same. No, it's not the same, but it's something. And we'll build a new family together. Mrs. Grace's funeral was simple, as she had requested. Neighbors, friends from the neighborhood, and customers from her confectionery business attended. Richard was struck by how many lives Mrs. Grace had touched. She was special, a neighbor told Emily, always helping everyone, always with advice, always with a smile. She really was, Emily agreed. She was the best person I knew. After the funeral, Richard and Emily returned home in silence. The house felt empty without Mrs. Grace's presence. I don't know if I can live here without her, Emily said, looking at the armchair where her grandmother always sat. You don't have to decide that now, Richard replied, and give it time. Dad, can I ask you something? Of course. Will you stay with me tonight? I don't want to sleep alone in this empty house. Of course I will. Richard slept on the living room couch but spent most of the night awake, listening to Emily cry in her room. He wanted to comfort her, but he knew some pain had to be fully felt before it could heal. The next morning, Emily came into the living room with swollen eyes but a more determined expression. Dad, I think I want to sell the house. Are you sure? I am. This house has too many memories. I need to start fresh somewhere new. Where do you want to live? Close to you, if you don't mind. Richard felt his heart warm. I'd love to have you nearby. They spent the next few days looking for an apartment for Emily. Richard wanted to buy something large and luxurious, but she preferred a simple two-bedroom in a middle-class neighborhood near his office. Why don't you want me to buy the apartment for you? Richard asked. Because I want to pay with my own money. I want to achieve things on my own. But you could consider it an advance on your inheritance. Dad, Emily interrupted, I need to feel independent. It's important to me. Richard understood. He arranged financing in her name, with payments she could afford from her sweets business. Moving was hard. Every piece of furniture, every item from the old house brought back memories of Mrs. Grace. But Richard helped Emily decide what to keep and what to donate. Take this photo, he said, pointing to an old picture of Jennifer holding baby Emily. I don't know if I want to. It makes me sad. But it's your story. Your mother may not be here anymore, but she's part of who you are. Emily took the photo and carefully placed it in a box. Dad, do you still feel angry at my mom for not telling you about me? Richard thought about the question. No, I'm not angry anymore. I understand why she did what she did. I wasn't a good person back then. But you could have changed if she had given you a chance. Maybe. Or maybe I would have been a terrible father and traumatized you for life. There's no way to know. What matters is we're together now. In her new apartment, Emily set up a professional kitchen for her sweets business. Richard suggested she create a brand and register the company. Em's Sweets isn't a very professional name, he said. What do you suggest? How about Grace's Confections in honor of your grandmother? Emily smiled for the first time since the funeral. It's perfect. Grace's Confections grew quickly. With Richard's help in administration and marketing, Emily secured contracts with cafes, restaurants, and companies. Within 6 months, she had 5 employees and was considering renting a commercial space. Dad, I think it's time for me to go to college, she said one day. Do you feel ready? I do. The business is stable, I have good employees, and I want to learn more about management and culinary arts. Great. Which college are you thinking of? I was considering culinary school at a private university nearby. They have night classes, so I can keep working during the day. Richard wanted to suggest a more prestigious school, maybe in New York, but held back. Emily had made it clear she wanted to carve her own path. I'll be rooting for you to get in. Actually, I already applied and took the test. The results came out yesterday. And I made it, she said with a radiant smile. Richard hugged her, proud. Congratulations, my dear. Your grandmother would be so proud. She would, right? She absolutely would. On the night before Emily started college, they had a special dinner at her apartment. Richard brought champagne to celebrate. Dad, can I tell you something? Of course. When I was little, I used to imagine what my father would be like. I made up stories about him in my head. What was he like in those stories? It changed. Sometimes he was an adventurer, sometimes a teacher, sometimes an artist. But he always loved me and was always proud of me. And now, do I measure up to the dad in your stories? You're better. Because you're real. Richard felt his eyes well up. Emily, I want to tell you something too. What? After your mother passed, I spent 20 years thinking I didn't need family. I believed professional success was enough. But finding you showed me what I was missing. You taught me how to be truly happy. You taught me a lot too. Like what? You taught me it's possible to start over at any age. You taught me that past mistakes don't define who we are today. And you taught me it's never too late to have a family. They toasted with champagne, father and daughter reunited after 20 years apart, ready to build a future neither had imagined. Dad, there's something I've always wanted to ask, but never had the courage. Ask me anything. Do you regret missing my childhood? Not being there when I learned to walk, to talk, when I was afraid of the dark, when I needed to be held? Richard took a deep breath before answering. I regret it deeply, but I can't change the past. What I can do is be there for your future. Be here when you graduate, when you get married, when you have children. If that's what you want, that's what I want. Then that's what we'll have. End of story. Dear listeners, after following this emotional journey of Richard and Emily, we'd love to know, what did you think of this reunion story? Share your thoughts below, telling us where you're watching from, and if you've ever experienced something similar in your own family. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss other touching stories like this one.